Hi, I'm Dan, and today we're going to be sharing with you our complete and utter love of all things videography. And we're going to also share just a little bit of the equipment that we use to obtain the cinematic shots that will always stay in memory. We're currently recording on our Nikon D750. It's a lovely full frame camera, and we have a list of lenses here that we use with it. So we're currently using a 28 to 80mm lens. We also have a 50mm prime lens here, which is a 1.8 aperture. Very nice for street photography. We use it also for a lot of filming. Then for our real estate equipment shots, we've got our trusty 12 to 24mm wide angle lens, which is brilliant for getting those super wide shots in either landscape or inside real estate. Then for some of our super zoom, we've got ourselves here. Now this is a 70 to 300. It's a very versatile full frame lens, very nice and crisp. No complaints with that at all. We then have our 100 to 300 here, which we use for a lot of our sports photography, things like that. We've got quite a bit of good stuff on that as well. So that's the camera that we're currently recording on. We've been working with that for 2 or 3 years now. Above us here, we have our very, very long in the tooth Nikon D3100, which is just going to do a top-down view and just show you all of the things that we have here so that you can see them a lot clearer. So, next stepping into line that we have here is our action cameras, and we'll start from front to back. We've got our little keychain fob camera here. Now it does 1080 in 30 frames per second. It does have some nice little IR night vision sensors on the front, so it doesn't do great. It is only a pinhole lens, but it can be very handy for very tight squeezes, things like that. Short battery life yet again. We don't use it very often. The one that we do prefer to use if we've got situations that require a very small camera, this is the Firefly Mini. It does, again, 1080p at 30 frames per second, but has a proper lens on it. It's a very nice little camera. We use that to attach to pets' collars, things like that, just to get some of those more off-the-wall sorts of shots. We even did, for a special we were shooting recently for a group called Snow Chef, we did knife cam, where we actually had it attached to a knife, and as the knife was cutting. So you can get some very interesting shots with those. Next up, we have some of our standard grade action cameras. This is one that came out this year. This is the Akaso V50X with basically next level stabilization on it. So it is excellent for that sort of thing. It comes with a red filter for underwater diving, things like that, because as you probably know, the red bleeds out as you start to get deeper and deeper in the water environment. Now, that one, very, very good camera. Comparable stabilization to the DJI Osmo Action and the GoPro Hero 6 and 7. So quite good, but not as expensive. Next up, we've got our Xiaomi Yi action camera, the 4K version. Now that one uses all the same chipset and the Ambarella chipset and the Sony sensor. All the same that the GoPro uses, but not quite as expensive. But that is also a beautiful, beautiful action camera for recording 4K. Next, we use this for a lot of events, such as birthday parties, and it was just recently done at a 92nd birthday, I believe it was. Now this is the Samsung Gear 360 4K. It records in full 360 degrees, and it can be done in live view, all the rest of it, and streamed. Now this is good for, as I said, events where you want to focus on the main subject but also be able to gauge the reaction of those around you. That footage can be viewed on a budget set of VR goggles that you place your phone into, and you can live the event again in real time. So very handy. It's not something that we use super often. We also have a waterproof case for that. For when we dive, we can sit that on the bottom and again choose which view we want to have a look at later on. Moving along, we've got our trusty SJ7 Star action camera here. Again, it does 4K at 30 frames a second and it has onboard stabilization, but today we have it in our 3-axis brushless gimbal. Now this is the Zhiyun Smooth Q. Excellent bit of kit. It doesn't take a lot of weight though, so we use it either for action cameras or very, very rarely we'll put a mobile phone in it and that sort of thing. So it's versatile, it's brilliant for those close-up things and when you need that fisheye shot. The Zhiyun Smooth Q is attached to one of our other favourite bits of kit, and this is called the Glide Gear. So when you want to get those nice pan shots and stay nice and steady, the Glide Gear moves it along that axis very smoothly and you can get those good pan shots. So another excellent piece of equipment. On the subject of stabilizers, we have our D-handle stabilizer here. We don't use it as much anymore these days. A lot of the time we'll have a DSLR in there, but if we need to have a shotgun microphone, a monitor, things like that attached to that. So that's quite useful, it's comfortable, you can use it for long periods of time. It's sturdy and steady, so it will sit down on its base quite nicely. And it is a cheap and very useful bit of equipment to have. So that's by Ulanzi. You may or may not have heard of that brand. They do a lot of things for the GoPro series and for the DJI Osmo series as well. So put that there. Moving on now to audio equipment. So depending on the sort of sound that you'd like, we're currently recording on the Movo wireless microphone, which is the M10. Now that is just attached here to the center underneath my shirt. It has a very nice pickup, very, very low dropouts, very low latency, and it's also an excellent budget microphone. Now we usually try to set our audio settings to -12 decibels. We don't want to be picking up hearing breath, things like that. We will also use dead cats, which are these fairy covers to cut out any wind noise, and there is usually a noise cancelling wind reduction setting on a lot of these cameras as well. So we try not to use audio straight out of the cameras, either the D31, the D750 or this lovely lady here, which we'll get to shortly. We prefer to use off-camera microphones just to get that much clearer audio. Also, and it's a bit of an objection of mine, I can sometimes hear the autofocus motors working in these if I'm trying to use either off-camera microphones that are very close or the onboard microphone. So we're trying to avoid that if at all possible. So we can change our field when it comes to a lot of these microphones to narrow in our pickup range or widen it out if we want to get that ambient noise. So they're excellent for those. Another piece of kit that we have here is our Zoom series of microphone recorders. Excellent as a backup to always have on hand. You can also easily adjust sound levels, things like that, adjust say a high or a low pass filter. Excellent, excellent bit of kit, and I can't recommend the Zoom series of microphones enough. Again, what we have here is our wireless microphones. Very handy, especially when you're not quite next to the camera, and you'll generally get about 10 to 15 meters without dropouts with those. Great bit of kit. We'll move over to our colourful beasts here in just a moment, but this is my most loved piece of kit right here. Now, to anyone starting off in videography, I cannot recommend getting one of these enough. They're low cost, they can range up to very high end, but you can pick up something quite cheaply, and this is called a Steadicam. Now, with your camera attached, and if they're weighted up correctly and balanced, they can be your best friend for life. So if you're doing videography at weddings, things like that, you can use a version of 3-axis brushless gimbals such as this, and they will always give you those nice shots without any jitter and movement and things like that. But once again, they're battery operated. They are prone to failure if you don't charge them, if you don't look after them properly, if they're not weighted correctly, things like that. Something like this, it's basic, it's never going to run out of battery, and it's something that will be your friend forever if you learn how to use it. So attached to our Steadicam today is our other love, which is our Panasonic Lumix FZ1000. Now it is a bridge camera, so you can't change the lenses over. However, this one records in 4K at 24 frames a second. It's a 1-inch sensor. So I do have some reservations with some of its low light performance. There's a little bit of noise sometimes in the shadows, things like that I'm not a huge fan of, but it does do excellent slow motion footage at 120 frames per second in 1080p. Panasonic do tend to, I believe, over sharpen their image a little, but it is still a beautiful crystal clear image. Can't recommend that camera enough. It's just gorgeous. Now it has a zoom range of 25 to 400, so extremely versatile, and you can get all the way out there to make sure that you get those shots that you need. So it does have a secondary microphone input jack. So again, if you're getting any of those sounds of the autofocus, things like that, you can get the off-camera microphone, and provided you lift it a little off the camera, you won't have an issue with it whatsoever. So moving on then to our high-end bits of equipment that cost a lot of money and a lot of fun to play with. I'm going to start with our backup drone here. Now this one is, by technology standards, getting a little long in the tooth. This is the Autel X-Star Premium. Now it shoots 4K at 30 frames a second. It's got a beautiful dynamic range. It has a physical range of about 2.5 kilometers, I believe. However, being a heavier drone, it is a little bit louder, but again, you can get a beautiful video shot with those. So, big fan of this. Very nice drone. Now that's about 4 years old now. However, it does tend to fall down a little bit, much like the Lumix here, in low light situations. So we want the biggest sensor available that we can, so that we don't get noise in our shots and we get that beautiful cinematic shot. So here we have our beautiful DJI Mavic 2 Pro. Now this one has a 1-inch sensor on the front, and excellent for low light when you're doing the dawn or dusk photography. Beautiful videography. It does come with a whole swathe of filters that we have here to bring out the absolute best, and also to keep your shutter speed just to double the frame rate that you're using, so that you're getting those nice crystal clear shots. That one has a range of, I do believe, about 7 kilometers. However, I wouldn't recommend taking it out that far. To CASA guidelines, we stay within line of sight at all times. And honestly, for situational awareness, when you're trying to record, line of sight's always far better. The moment you start to get out and you're trying to get shots, you do run into danger of power lines, trees, things like that. And I know that when you're working with live view power lines, you generally don't see them until the absolute last minute or last second, and by that stage it's usually too late. So there are plenty of videos on YouTube with these things coming a cropper, as they say. So again, brilliant bit of kit, highly recommended, and you certainly won't regret using that. Moving on here to our big yellow beast. This here is the Aquarobot Nemo. Now this little baby here will dive underwater to depths of 150 meters. Excellent piece of kit yet again. It records in 4K video here at the front at 30 frames per second, with a pair of LED lights for when you get down deep enough that the light starts to fade. Again, as I was talking about with some of these action cameras for diving, the red tends to bleed out in the video, so it has an onboard red filter to bring up those colors yet again. So these are some of the bits of kit, and when I say some, only some. We've got plenty of other things, and the table isn't big enough for the swathes of batteries that we have for all of this equipment, because once you start to get into photography and videography, you will know for a fact firsthand that batteries are the absolute bane and joy of your existence. When they're charged, they're joy. When they're not, they're the bane. So if you're off on a shoot, again, we've just come back from a tour shooting for Snow Chef. We are booked in to do Australian Experience in February, and in that time we've learned that constantly battery charging is just one of those things that comes with the role of the videographer, and you've got to be on it, and you cannot make mistakes with batteries. That's one of the biggest things. But again, this table's not big enough for all of them. So what you may not be able to see currently on camera here is we have a softbox light just in front there, just to illuminate and take the shadows out of the face. We have a softbox light just up here to illuminate just out onto the table so that we can see our equipment here properly. And just to create a little bit of separation between myself and the background, we also have an RGB light here behind us, just casting light up onto the back wall. So again, lighting, very, very important. To avoid getting noise in our shadows, things like that, using a black tablecloth, we've exposed our video just to the right a little bit so that we're getting that detail in the darker areas, and then in post we can sort that out and color grade it. So these are just a few of the bits that we have, that we use just in day-to-day videography, and hopefully that shows sort of passion that we've got in bringing those gorgeous shots that you go, wow, you know, I want to see that again. I want to know how they did it. Well, with equipment like this, it's all very possible. You can always spend a lot more money if you want to, but this is the sort of kit that you can still get the shots to make people stand back and wonder how they can get shots like that also. So hopefully we've shared that with you now. We'll see you on the big screen. See ya.